out of audiences when they clap before you start to say anything. You know, I could say something that would disgust you or make you angry or whatever. It's not my intention. I hope you'll excuse my appearance. The makeup guy wasn't ready for me. I'm trying to get a little levity into this now because what I'm going to talk about is pretty heavy stuff at times. It makes me sad. But I'm not a sad guy. I'm a real happy guy. I confess to being an adult learner also. I got a bachelor's degree when I was 48 years old. And that was a while back. Now the accommodations they have for me is all you have to do is you become a fat old one-legged guy and you get to sit down. So this is pretty cool. And I'll begin. If you've ever attended or heard of any kind of 12-step program, and I know some of you have because this audience is salted, some of what I have to say will sound familiar. However, I'm not here to discuss the benefits of these programs or in fact any kind of treatment modality. Whatever works for you if you have an addiction or if you know people that have addictions, whatever works for them is fine with me. I've heard of people getting sober through church. I've heard of people getting sober through therapy and, you know, get rid of their addictions through whatever. Whatever works, works. Because you can become a productive member of society, but not while you're addicted. Not for me, anyway. It didn't work for me. My express purpose here today is to pass on information I believe can be helpful to those that are afflicted with any kind of addiction. Probably everyone here knows of somebody who has had problems with addictions. Family, friends, whatever. The message I have is one of simplicity. If you or someone you know or love has what I have, I'm asking you to keep an open mind. I suggest you don't have to believe everything I have to say, but I ask you to believe that I believe it. To my knowledge, my talk today is not backed by any scientific study. There's a lot of stuff that's been done, but not anything really definitive that I'm aware of anyway. It's based on experience and observations over 30 years of not using alcohol or any other substance, any other mind-altering chemical. My beliefs are shared by many of my contemporaries I'm lost here. People I have spent a lot of time with, and we have a shared goal of staying drug-free and helping others do the same. This is kind of an edited version of some of my life and how it has affected me and other people in my life. Everybody here has probably heard the expression, you don't know what you don't know. My first recognition of that expression was in August of 1979. It's the last time I had any drink or any kind of drug. Prior to that date, for several years, I had attempted to avoid using alcohol or other drugs. There were periods where I would stay sober and straight for months, weeks, months, days, whatever. But I couldn't say stop, and I didn't know why. Something or nothing would set me off. It didn't have to be anything important. It didn't have to be anything, catastrophic. I would just go. Didn't know why. I had started and stopped college so many times that I thought it was never going to happen for me. I was 39. I was married. I had 2 children, a house, a couple of cars that ran, a very deplorable work record, and a bank account that was in the minus column more than it was in the positive column. I knew I was addicted, but I couldn't do anything about it. Now, interestingly enough, I had been for treatment at a VA facility in Connecticut a few years before, but I really didn't know why I was there. I really thought I was crazy. And that was kind of okay. That's where I was. That's where I was in my head. running away, from my family or suicide really seemed like pretty good options. I was that low. And then when the confusion was at its worst, when my self-esteem was completely gone, and when my family was at their wits' end, something really good happened for me. And it was really good that I got arrested. I got arrested for drunk driving. It ended up getting reduced because I paid a lawyer a lot of money to reckless driving, which, I still lost the license and everything. But I'm going to go through how I got arrested, because I don't remember any of this. This has all been repeated to me by one of the cops. This was in my hometown, a little town in central Connecticut. And I'd been on a 2-day binge or whatever. And the last place I stopped in, I got some alcohol to go. Now, you're not supposed to do that in these places, but I knew everybody. I knew all the people in all the bars because that's what I did. I drank. And I made it about 200 yards up the street. That's the main street in this little town where everybody knows everybody, where I knew every single person in that town when I was this high. And I passed out. I passed out behind the wheel of my car. I didn't have an accident. I'd had those before, but I didn't have one this night. And these two cops came up, one of whom I knew. He's the guy that told me the story afterwards. They didn't know whether I was alive or dead. Now, I don't know what policemen do to find out what that is. I know they use maybe a mirror, see if you're breathing or not. But this guy knew me, and he said, well, we're going to give this guy some oxygen. So they gave me oxygen, and for about 10 minutes, I was with a mask on. Now, I was still in my car. The car was still running. After about 10 minutes, as it was repeated to me, I took off the mask. I came around, I took off the mask, I handed it to the cop, and I said, thank you, and I drove off. And, as I say, I don't remember that. Now, how he told me the story afterwards was that he was going to let me go. That's how it was back in those days. He was going to let me go, and fortunately for me, there was a rookie that was with him. He'd been on the force for about 2 weeks. And he said, we can't let this guy go. He's going to kill himself or somebody else. So they came after me. And again, as it was repeated to me, I tried to attack them with my car. I was unsuccessful with that. I eventually drove off the road into an open field. And then I tried to attack them with my fists. And that's really not a very good idea when you're really drunk and you got two cops that know what they're doing. Because I did find a couple of bruises on me later. My first recollection really was when I was locked up in a jail cell in my hometown. The embarrassment, the shame, all that stuff that came along with that. And I had a television camera on me, and I just felt so horrible. But I was still drunk. And I had this huge resentment towards these people that were on the other side of the bars, the police. And some of these guys were friends of mine. But, I had this huge resentment. And then I had what I call my epiphany, or, you can call it whatever you want, but just this thought came into my head that, if I stop doing what I'm doing, they'll stop doing what they're doing. They won't arrest me anymore because they won't have any reason to. I'm a pretty nice guy when I'm not drinking. Anyway, that's why it was good, because it made me take a look at myself, what I was doing to the people I loved and cared for, including myself. With consultation with my medical doctor, it was determined I should go away for treatment. So I did so. And the counselor that was assigned to me asked me what I knew about addictions. And I said something like, addicted people are, they're weak-willed, and they're lazy, and they're irresponsible, and all those adjectives that you can use. That's what I described myself as. So you know where my self-esteem was. Her reply was that it was something like what I started this with. You don't know what you don't know. Because I didn't know what I was saying. I really didn't know what was going on there. That simple statement opened my mind. It made me want to learn anything and all that I could about alcoholism and drug addiction. Alcohol was my drug of choice, but I did a lot of other drugs too. Realizing and recognizing that my life needed to be changed became my purpose. While I was at the treatment center, it was time to go to classes, read pertinent literature, and try to piece my life back together. It wasn't what I expected to be doing at this time in my life, but I didn't think of it as difficult because of all the tools at my disposal. I learned that my emotional capacity was about half of what my chronological age was. My maturity had slowed when the alcohol and drug use became prominent. And I know that today, that's true. It's kind of nice now when you're 70 because I still feel a lot younger. After 35 days in this facility, this treatment center, filled with all this fresh knowledge and terrified, I went back into the real world. And I went back to a job that I had had for a while, and you know, a pretty good job, paid well anyway. And some issues started right away because the people that I had left at that job were used to drinking with me, were used to doing drugs with me. And they continually offered me, and they said, well, this is just some sort of a scam. You know, you'll never be able to stop and stay stopped and all that because you've never been able to do it before. Actually, that was motivating. That was motivating for me because that's the place I was in. Anyway, I worked at that job. I did aftercare at the place where I was. I went every week for a period of time. I joined a men's group where we could talk about anything and all things. Women came up a lot. But our use and abuse of alcohol and other drugs certainly came up a lot also. Anyway, after a couple of years, it was determined that, for me, I decided it was time for me to make some changes and to kind of grow a little bit and try college again. And although some of my prior credits had disappeared, they were lapsed, I was able to be placed in my third year. So I was a junior in college, and I hadn't been to college in probably, 5 or 6 years at the time. But as I said, I started and stopped. I took college courses in Washington State, in Connecticut, in California, one class in California. Some of that was while I was in the military. Anyway, I get placed in my third year, and now I'm going to this school where there's all a bunch of old people like me. And I was able to thrive. And I just loved it. It was it made more sense than any of my other college experiences. I did a lot of weekend stuff. Sometimes I'd take a class for like a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and I'd get 3 credits. Pretty good deal. And of course, I wasn't using them, so I was able to learn. You know, that was the real important thing. A work study project came up at the VA hospital where I had been at one time, and I was able to read my records, and I knew that I was being treated for chronic alcoholism, is what they told me. But they knew, but they never got it over to me. I never knew at that time why I was there. I thought I was going to have not enough time here. But it's kind of ironic that my position was that of counselor. I'm a counselor in a place where I didn't know why I was there before. Shortly before I was to graduate from college, I was able to go to work for the Department of Defense. And because of my background, I was selected to be the EAP administrator and counselor. It was collateral duty, but one that I relished. The ability to be able to help others was really very fulfilling. I was attending conferences and workshops which helped me both personally and professionally. My ability to learn was invigorating. It wasn't something I expected. My recovery allowed me to grow by leaps and bounds. It could be said that I was behind the curve because of my later in life development, but meeting people with similar kinds of stories at some of these workshops was encouraging. It was comforting to know that my late evolving life wasn't unaccompanied. There were many others in the same boat for varying reasons. Next 15 years or so were kind of normal, whatever that means. You know, normal is like setting on a washing machine. There was another transfer to a defense office that was closer to home. I had gotten divorced because that marriage was destroyed by my use and abuse of alcohol. So I got remarried, and we were doing really well. Life on life's terms at times was difficult, just as for all the rest of the world. But my life would probably be considered prosperous. I'm gonna have to, I went through that period of time, and I was really doing well, and I reached the point where I was able to retire. It was the year after, just about a year after 9/11, and I thought my life was going to be one of, I'm going to do some volunteer work. I'm going to play a lot of golf, and I'm going to teach people with disabilities how to play golf, because I've been a golfer all my life, even with my disability, and I love the game, and I wanted to pass it on. My children were now 38 and 37. My son Tom Jr. had a lot of the same issues that I had. He was addicted also. While I was on a weekend retreat, my wife called me and said that one of my grandsons had called and said that he was being abused and neglected by my son. I determined that I would take a ride out to Oklahoma where he was living. He went there for employment and lost the job, of course, because he was addicted. But I went out there and I made an assessment of my two grandsons, who were 13 and 15, and it was worse than what I had expected. They were being abused. They were being neglected. I went to the proper authorities. I knew that was my responsibility. I told them that. Told them what was going on, and they said, well, then we're going to have to remove the children from the home. They did. I'm trying to speed this up now. I left a couple of days later. I asked my son to get some help. He refused. I was on my way back home, and I got a call from a woman that I had befriended out there who had tried to help the family. And my son, she said she heard over her husband's scanner that there was a suicide at my son's home. And she went over and checked, and in fact, he had killed himself. He took a bunch of pills and chased it with some brandy or something, and he was dead before he hit the floor. And I mean, it was just horrible. I was just, I thought I was the catalyst for this. I know that's not true today. At any rate, my wife and I decided that we would take in these two teenage boys, very damaged teenage boys, and we did, and that turned into a bit of a disaster. And I'm fast running out of time here. So, they were with us for about a year. Both of them wanted to leave, and they did. I don't know a lot about what's going on in their lives now, but I know what's going on in my life. And I started this off really on a sad note, but I'm really a happy guy. I got a lot of good things going for me. I had a really strong marriage. I'm going to be 71 in a couple of days. I wasn't supposed to live this long. I really wasn't. I had cancer cut out of my soft palate when I was around 55 or something like that. If I hadn't stopped drinking and smoking also, the doctor told me that the cancer that he cut out of me was exactly that was caused by alcohol and cigarettes. So, I'm not supposed to be alive. I don't have any great platitudes or anything on, how to get by when you're addicted. I know some simple things though. I know that I found out when my son was there, when I knew he had killed himself, I wanted to drink. 25 years without a drink, and I wanted to drink. I wanted to get 2 quarts of scotch, go to a hotel, and just do it. And I didn't. I called my wife first, and then I called a friend of mine that I'd known going through program, and he said, well, it's nothing you have to drink over time. You can do anything one day at a time. And I knew that was true because I had so much practice at it. And my life goes on, and I'm a pretty happy guy. I do pretty much what I want to do. I enjoy life to the fullest. It's really a good life. There's not a lot of easy answers as far as I'm concerned. But there's a lot of simple solutions. There really are. And I'd like to thank everybody for being here.